Ask and you shall receive. Today's golden weapon review is going to be on the combat knife. Welcome back to Black Tide TV, and I asked that question on Twitter the other day, what weapon do you want to see next? And I gave a couple options because I am still going in order, and the combat knife is actually one of the first. It's the first weapon in the special category, so technically it is one of the first weapons, and it is going to be the weapon that we're doing today. So the combat knife is obviously special. It's not like any other weapon in the game. It's the only melee weapon in the game. It's the only special weapon in the game, and it doesn't have any attachments. It's just a very, very special weapon. So today's episode is going to be a little bit special. We're going to be talking a lot more about perks and other kind of things to use in your class, like tactical grenades or lethal grenades. So let's jump right into this. The combat knife is a stealthy, instantly lethal secondary weapon. Now, I've seen a lot of people using it as a secondary weapon, but most people use it as a primary. So there are people that run around with like a loud primary weapon, and then whenever they get into the enemy flank and they need to use a silent weapon for just to dispatch some enemies that are unaware of their presence, they'll take out the combat knife and stab a couple guys in the back. I have seen that, but that's not a popular way to use this weapon, which is kind of a shame because it is an effective weapon at doing that. But what I see it most used as is, like you're seeing right now in this gameplay, a primary weapon. A lot of people just run around with a combat knife. They load up their class with perks, or maybe they'll bring a secondary weapon, a primary weapon, and then use that as a secondary weapon and actually run around with the knife instead. And I've seen that a lot, and that is probably the number one way to use this, is like Michael Myers style. Just run around and try to use your knife. You know, it can be pretty difficult in this game because there's lots of people jumping around and using their boost abilities and stuff. It's kind of hard to catch some people in this game, especially without any lightweight perks or anything like that, which is why I'm going to be recommending the afterburner perk later, which we'll talk about once we get into that perk section. But mostly I see people running around with this as a primary weapon, which can be fun, but don't expect to get a great gameplay this way. I mean, I can get a lot of good gameplays when I'm doing this. I can when I'm using the right specialist, when I'm running around and I'm actually trying my hardest. I can actually get some pretty good gameplay with nothing but the knife, but it's not as good gameplay as I could get if I was using an actual gun. So obviously there are no attachments available for the knife, so the mastery of the knife comes from map knowledge and the proper use of perks. So it's all about how you use your perks, what kind of style of knife you're going to use. I have a couple tactics for when you're using your knife. One, which is pretty much what everybody does, and another, which is what I've seen a little bit of. This is completely just people using this weapon as a primary weapon. I have two tactics. The first of which is to flank around the outside of the map right off the bat. Don't go for any objectives. Just go around the entire map, get into the enemy spawn, and just start stabbing people in the back. And then when you die, you just do it again. You flank around the entire outside of the map, trying to avoid as many enemies as you can. Get back to the enemy spawn and start stabbing people in the back again. That's the number one way I see a lot of people running this weapon. You can't really run this weapon straight down the middle or try to take any objectives or anything while you're using this, because you will get slaughtered no matter what. Unless you're using like maybe batteries, kinetic armor is the only way you'll be able to survive getting shot at enough to get up towards an enemy that's shooting at you and kill him. So most of the time you're going to be using this weapon as a stealthy weapon. You're going to be running around and stabbing people in the back. The second tactic is to actually camp around corners, which I don't condone, but that is a way that I've seen a lot of people using it. Is just they wait around the corner at a high traffic area until an enemy comes around, and then they stab him before he really gets around the corner and knows what's happening. So those are the two ways that I see a lot of people using the knife when they're using it as a primary weapon only. Now, the number one thing that you need to know for both of these tactics is map knowledge. So you got to know where the enemies are going to be. You need to know what the higher traffic areas of the map are. For the first tactic, you need to know what the higher traffic areas are so you can avoid those areas. And the second tactic, you need to know the higher traffic areas so you can get get into a corner in those areas where a lot of enemies will be running by. So it really depends on map knowledge. I would highly advise that you use other weapons first if you're still just new to the game, or even if you're seasoned at the game but you still don't know a lot of the best ways to get around the map, a lot of the wall running spots and stuff. I'd suggest that you look up some of those ways, like go on and research. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that show you how to get around the map the fastest, how to like special movement techniques, like other like special walls that you wouldn't know that you could run on, and stealthy spots that you can run on the walls to get around the flank. I'd suggest that you look up all of this stuff because it will help you a lot for using either one of these techniques with the combat knife. So the other thing that you're going to want to need besides map knowledge is perk knowledge. There are a lot of perks in this game, and a lot of them are mostly useless, so you're going to want to use the ones that rely completely on stealth and speed. The speed perks aren't that great in this game. There's no lightweight, like I said before. There's nothing amazing about the speed perks. The only real speed perk in the game is Afterburner, which is a perk 1, and it's actually going to make your thrusters recharge faster. So it's not actually going to make you move any faster, but your thrusters will be recharging quicker, meaning you can do more wall runs and you can kind of get up and out of the fight quicker. You can boost away, you can boost around, you can slide on your knees and get around the place. It's a good tactic it's a good perk to use with the first tactic. Obviously, if you're camping around corners, it doesn't really matter, but this one is going to be really useful if you're trying to run around the map and get into the enemy flank and you know a lot of wall running locations that you can use to flank around the enemy. This is going to be a perk that you're going to want to use. Other than that, I'd recommend all of the stealth perks. So that would be Ghost, which is going to keep you off the radar as long as you're moving, which should be all the time with the combat knife, unless of course you're corner camping. But Ghost, usually you're going to be running around with the knife. Like I said, that's going to be the most popular tactic with this weapon. So Ghost is going to be really effective with this weapon. You're going to want to use Hardwired, which is just god tier for the combat knife because it will keep you, it'll reduce how much you show up on 6 cents by 6 cents perks and tracker perks, so people won't be able to track your footprints. People will won't know that you're next to them until you're right on top of them. It'll also negate like counter UAVs and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, which doesn't really matter, but it's really about the 6 cents and the tracker perks. Fighting off those is really effective for the combat knife, so Hardwired as your perk 2. And finally, your perk 3 should be Blast Suppressor, so you can keep boosting around, especially when paired with Afterburner. You can boost around a lot, and you can stay off the radar while you're boosting. And I also run Dead Silence in my third perk because a lot of people run the Awareness in this game. I don't know why Treyarch put Awareness in this game. It's just like the campiest perk ever, but it's still in there, and you gotta be able to compete with that. So Dead Silence is going to be your best bet at competing with that. Most people, even with Awareness, won't hear you if you have Dead Silence until you're pretty close, at which point you should be able to stab them and just move on. Now, the last thing I want to recommend in this video is some lethal and tactical options. Now, the lethals, you don't want to use anything like standard like frag grenades or Semtex. That's not going to be very helpful with this weapon. You're either going to want to stay stealthy or have a very powerful lethal or tactical that will help you in close quarters. So obviously the number one thing that I would suggest, which I'm not running in this gameplay for some reason, is the combat axe. The combat axe is obviously like it just goes hand in hand with the combat knife. They both start with combat, and people have been using them together for as long as I can remember, right back to like whenever the combat knife actually first got introduced in this game. Actually, in previous games, like before the combat knife was its own thing, when there was a tactical knife on pistols, people were running the throwing knife and the tactical knife on pistols at the same time, and people have just been running around and knifing and tactical knifing or throwing axing or whatever you want to call it, tomahawking people for a long time. That's been like the number one lethal that people use with their knives and with their melee classes, and obviously that's going to be the number one thing that you're going to want to use. But if you don't like that, if you're not very good with the combat axe, keep getting knife and axe mixed up. If you're not very good with the throwing axe or combat axe, you can always use a C4. I don't know if they can actually do the double tap square and explode in this game, because I've never actually used a C4 in this game. But if they can do the double tap square to explode right after you throw it, the C4 is actually going to be very, very effective. If you run into a room and there's a lot of guys in there, you can just throw in the C4, double tap square, and explode, and it will have a half decent blast radius and clear out the room for you. Now, tacticals are a little bit different. I'd only recommend using concussions. You could use shock charges if you were pretty accurate and you could throw a shock charge right into an enemy's face, but shock charges fly through the air pretty slow, so I'd say the concussion would be the way to go. You can throw it into a room if you know there's an enemy in there ahead of time, and then get in there and they won't be able to move to turn to shoot at you. That's going to be your best bet. With flashbangs, people can still spray around the corner and stuff, which isn't very helpful, whereas concussions, your enemies are essentially frozen on the spot, so they can't really turn to kill you, and that's going to be your best bet for tacticals. Thanks a lot for watching this combat knife golden weapon review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button. Tell me what combat knife. Tell me what golden review you want to see next. We've got the KM44 and Black Cell combined. We've got the MR6 and the BRM, I think, are the last three that we have to do before we can get into the second tier of weapons. So let me know in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next video.